In this lesson, we're taking a look at alternate picking, so playing with a mixture of down and up picks. This lesson is part of the techniques section of series 3 of my beginner course. You can find the full link to the playlist in the description below. Now when it comes to picking, most players are more comfortable with down picks at first because it just feels like a bit more of a natural movement, and that's totally normal. But the problem comes when players only ever do down picks and disregard up picks. The reason being that when you first start out on guitar, you might play a lot of slow and simple parts where you can get away with doing all down picks, but then further down the line you're going to struggle because you haven't developed the technique and comfort for up picks, so you're going to find it difficult to play faster and more complex parts that require up picks as well. Just to dive in and show you exactly what I mean here, a great example I can think of off the top of my head would be the song Black Dog by Zeppelin. So if I play that with alt picking, that really is how you would want to play this riff. You can play it with all down picks, which would look like this. So you can see it looks quite inefficient and awkward in the right hand, whereas if I go back to the alt picks, that feels much smoother and much easier to play. And just to give you a really extreme and advanced example, we could use Thunderstruck by AC/DC, which goes like this. And obviously you just wouldn't be able to play anything like that if you weren't used to the alternate picking. I definitely feel within my right to kind of preach this a little bit because I had this exact problem when I was learning to play. No one really advised me to put more up picks into my playing at first, so I ended up having to spend quite a lot of hours sorting out my right hand technique until it was comfortable, and that's why nowadays I always encourage my students to put in some alternate picking from the start, and I definitely notice that those who engage in it more have an easier ride when it comes to picking more complex parts down the line. So I want you to have that same experience and avoid having any kind of limitations on your progression or the repertoire that you can play. As ever, you can download guitar tabs for all the technique exercises as well as materials from the rest of the entire beginner course via my Patreon page through the link in the description, but for now though, let's dive into some alternate picking exercises. The first exercise I want you to try is super simple. It's just a case of choosing any note on the guitar and alternate picking it. So I'm going to be doing the 5th fret on the G string here, and I'm just going to be picking down, up, down, up, down, up. So you're just getting used to the action of picking both up and down. Now there's a couple of other things I want to talk about here before you get started. The first is pick selection. When you're alternate picking, you really don't want one of them thin, flappy picks. They're much better for strumming because they'll bend to the contour of the strings while you're strumming. But for picking, you might want to try a little bit of a thicker pick, maybe something like 1mm, and then it won't bend and it'll be more reliable as you pick through the string. Now another thing I want to talk about is the pick angle, because most of the time people will just have the pick flat against the string and pushing through like this, but you can also try bending the thumb ever so slightly to create a bit of an angle in the pick. Might only be like 10-15 degrees or something like that. It's very slight, but that might just enable you to slice through the string a little bit more, and it might feel a little bit better for you. This is what I do, but it's all a case of preference, so you've got to try both and see what's best for you. Next, I want to talk about the placement of your picking hand, because it's quite a good idea to rest the palm of your hand on the lower strings. So if I'm playing this 5th fret on the G string, I'm actually resting the palm of my right hand on the bottom few strings, so if I strum them, you can hear they're not ringing out or anything because my palm's resting on them, so they're all nice and muted. And I am going to talk about this a little bit more in the next video on string muting, but it's just a good habit for whatever string you're picking to rest on the strings below, because it'll give you a little bit more stability and keep those strings muted. However, it does feel different on different strings, so you might want to experiment on different strings. For example, if I'm playing a note on the bottom string, I actually rest the palm of my hand on the body of the guitar, so you've got to experiment and see what works best for you. So I know this is a really simple exercise, but there is quite a lot of fundamental stuff going on here, so I think it's worth playing about with. And you should be aiming to have perfect timing on the picking, as well as equal note velocity. So it shouldn't be a case of like all your down picks are really loud, but then your up picks sound really weak in comparison. You could maybe even use a metronome click to practice this as well and keep it all in time and in check. But basically you should have this kind of sound. just keeping everything nice and consistent. For the next exercise, we're going to be picking multiple notes on multiple strings. So we're going to start by placing the first finger on the 7th fret of the D string, which is this note. Then the little finger is going to go 2 frets higher on the 9th fret of the G string, which is this note. And we're just going to be alternating between them two notes like this. Now you might recognise that as the intro from the song Chasing Cars, which is exactly where I've stolen it from, but it's just quite a good one because you can practice picking them different strings, and it also enables you to introduce this concept of inward or outward picking, which I'm going to show a close-up of the right hand to explain. We are going to look at this song in full in the next series, so it does give you a bit of a head start if that's a song that you're interested in learning. So just to give you some detail on the inward and outward picking, if I'm inward picking, it means I'm always picking towards the middle of the two strings that I'm focusing on. So if I'm focusing on the D string and the G string, then inward picking would be down picking the D and then up picking the G, because the pick's always moving into the middle of the two strings. Whereas outward picking is the opposite, so I'd start with the pick in the middle and then I'd up pick the D, then down pick the G. And then when I'm picking, the pick is always moving outwards from the middle of the two strings. It's a total preference this, so you've got to try both and see which one feels more comfortable to you. Once again, you want to be aiming for perfect timing and equal note velocity, and also in this example you want to hear both strings ringing out together, so it's a good one for checking that when you pick the next string you're not impeding the previous string, so it should sound nice and smooth like this, and not all jittery like this. So that's what you're aiming for. In this next exercise, we're going to be picking the 5th fret and 7th frets on every string using fingers 1 and 3. So that's going to go like this. I'm going to start with first finger on the 5th fret on the bottom string and I'm going to down pick. Then third finger on the 7th fret and up pick. First finger on the A string, down pick. Third finger on the A string, up pick. And it just continues like this up the strings. So down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and then we're going to start from the top and go back down again. So starting with third finger on 7th fret high E string, pick down, move to first finger, pick up, then go down the strings, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Now in lead guitar, you end up using first and third fingers quite a lot. They're quite prominent fingers because they're possibly the strongest pairing. So this is quite a nice place to start in terms of the finger choice. But the main reason for this exercise is so you can practice alternate picking on each string, because you have to get used to the hand moving up and down the body to find the perfect place to pick each string. Now we're not using a proper scale here or anything, so the idea of this exercise isn't that it's going to sound amazing, it's just to give you something simple to practice so that you can focus on the right hand action. But it is going to get you sort of prepared for playing scales in the future, and it's also quite a good hand synchronization exercise. So in the previous video I talked quite a lot about this, so you could use this as a hand synchronization exercise where you're trying to minimize the gap between notes so it sounds nice and smooth like this. So synchronizing the picking of the string with the finger going down so there's no gaps at all. And as usual, you're aiming for really good timing and consistent note velocity. And in this final exercise, we're going to be doing exactly the same thing, but we're going to use all 4 fingers. So we're going to have first finger on 5th fret, second finger on 6th fret, third finger on 7th, and then little finger on 8th fret. And once again, we're going to be alternate picking every string and moving all the way up and down the strings. So we're going to have down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and that continues. And then descending. now you're getting 4 alternate picks on each string and you're using all of the fingers. Again, you're aiming for consistent timing and good note velocity, and you can also use this as a hand synchronization exercise. It would also be really good to do along with a metronome and gradually raise the speed over time. It also works as quite a good warm-up, which is pretty necessary, especially if you live in the UK. So during the winter months, I'll normally start my practice just with this exercise, just to kind of get my fingers warmed up a bit. So it's a really simple exercise, but has many benefits. So I hope that's helped you get to grip with the technique of alternate picking and understand why it's so beneficial to introduce it to your playing at an early stage. Now, the exercises in this video are very useful for targeted alternate picking practice, but remember, the end goal is to use it in actual songs, so only use these exercises for as long as you need to and try and get it into some real music as soon as possible. As I mentioned, you can download guitar tabs for all the technique exercises from my Patreon page via the link in the description. All the lessons are nice and organised on my YouTube channel page, so feel free to subscribe if you want to follow along. And in the next lesson, we're going to look at a really important topic, which is keeping your playing nice and tidy using string muting, so I'll see you in that one.